So welcome to Matthew Bonstetter. We're going to be having another phenomenal conversation today, or my first with Matthew at least, anyway, on the subject of regenerative finance. And phenomenal conversations are conversations designed to connect head, heart, and soul to give us deeper confidence in the possibility of a regenerative world. So welcome, Matthew. So glad you decided to be interviewed. And I'm looking forward to what we can exchange together today. So I'd love, I'm sure the audience that doesn't know you would love to hear a little bit about your background and how you came to be involved in the world of regenerative finance.
Okay, yeah, real quick. Yeah, it's great to be here, Dave. Thank you. So when I was a student getting my small business management degree at Arizona State University, I took a class, communications class, and one of the subjects that I could choose to speak and do a video on was Superfund sites. And so I realized at that time that we were polluting ourselves too much. And so I became more environmentally aware. Back then, I would do emails and I would, join some groups and donate money to help out. And then I did business. And then my family became, pretty wealthy and business was doing pretty good. And I'm high social. So I decided to follow my heart, which was to help the world. So literally since like the 1990s, I've pretty much dedicated myself to being a researcher on understanding what are the top challenges, and then more importantly, what are the top solutions. I've been to a lot of Earth Day events. I went to the Bioneers Conference north of San Francisco 5 years in a row, volunteered. And so, and there were thousands of people there each year. I've been to Farm Aid. I've been to hemp festivals, Clean Cities. Actually went to the Clinton Global Initiative as a videographer for one of my friends. So I've been to a lot of conferences and seminars, mainly in America, but I've been to 33 countries. And when I was traveling as a business consultant, I saw a lot of extreme poverty, especially in Africa where I was and stuff like that. And so, again, I'm just following my heart, which is to be of service to humanity as best I can. So, in a sense, I've been into the regenerative finance space since about 1992. Now on X Spaces, on the Twitter Spaces, they have something called REFI, R-E-F-I, and that stands for regenerative finance. So I've literally been on hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of those spaces over the last 2+ years now. And so I know all the top experts on X there, and they all know me. And I have a lot of one-on-ones and talks with other people, and just stay up to date. And for me, Project Drawdown said we had to transition around $30 trillion, and this is several years ago, over the next 30 years. So we do have to get big money involved, the pension funds, insurance funds, university endowments and stuff like that, and philanthropy.
Okay, that's really interesting. You mentioned about your business career, and from previous discussions, that was around sort of human resources and human resource issues. How has that impact your knowledge of human development, as it were, or human betterment? How has that influenced your work in the world? How are you applying that? How have you applied that in your work?
Well, yeah, I think it's important because, people have different reasons why they do things. And we use Dr. Sprenger's work, and then we use Dr. Marston's work on your behavioral tendencies. So we started out with behavioral tendencies, and we got into the values, what motivated you. And so people receive communication differently. Some people want the bottom line, they're busy people, they tell me the bottom line. And then some people want all the data and facts and information. So, the network that I've been looking to create is actually one where communications is very key. So you know who your target market is, and then you take the message and you put it in a way that you believe will work for them. And part of the vision is always to have a lot of different ways, from emails to videos to podcasts to, different ways that they can receive information that works for them on a platform that works for them. Because right now, we have so many ways to communicate. If you have a computer or a phone and internet, there's just so many free ways to communicate.
Great. Okay, that's really interesting. So we've got we're talking about regenerative finance as a topic, and of course, most people will be familiar with standard economics. You were mentioning all the green sustainability initiatives that you've participated in. How does regenerative finance differ from regular finance? What do you see as the key differences, what it does and how it affects the world, as opposed to the current economic model?
Well, sustainability was a pretty big word there for many years. In my mind, that has been replaced with regenerative because we can no longer sustain where we're at, which means we have to regenerate. And I come from Iowa, which is a farm country, well, farm state in America. So for me, we have to work with our soils more, and we've learned a lot more about soils and the microbes and stuff like that, and erosion and stuff. So I know it's a big industry, big ag is a big industry, but for me, we really do have to go into regenerative farming. And, there's agroforestry and stuff like that. And, just leaving our old growth forest is actually more important than planting new trees. So yes, we need to plant new trees, but those trees aren't really, a lot of them aren't going to have the effects that we really want for many years, if not decades. So I do study both micro and macro economics, so I understand the challenges. But to me, it's like it is a do or die for most of humanity. What we do over the next few years to at least turn us in the right direction. And one good thing, Project Drawdown did have a Zoom about 9 months ago, maybe a year ago, and they basically proved, one of the board of directors proved that you can actually invest your money in things that are doing good and get a great return as well. So I think that messaging is very important. And for me, it's all about transitioning the old into the new. So it's not a us versus them. It's like, hey, one of the biggest coal barons on the planet, billionaire, is actually creating the biggest solar field. So that's the type of things that I see. It's not like, oh, you're coal or you're oil or nuclear, you're bad. No, I wanted to say, let's have experts lead the way. What do we need to do over the next 10, 20, 40 years to put us in the best position that we can to deal with all of our extreme fires, floods, droughts, and storms and heat records?
That's really fascinating. So there's something there that I don't think it's necessarily common in the activist world or even the regenerative world, but you're talking about something, regeneration being more integrative, being more inclusive rather than oppositional.
Yeah, I would say we don't have time to fight the old, and so we have the bell curve. So about 70% of us are in the middle, a little bit left on some issues, a little bit right on other issues. So the extreme left and the extreme right, most of them are going to be closed-minded and won't want to listen unless, we put out so much information and it's maybe short and funny or catches their attention at first and they can take a look at it. But more than likely, it'd be people around them changing, and then maybe that would have an impact. So my goal would be to work with the 70% in the middle of the bell curve, and be very inclusive to transition together.
Right. Okay. And I mean, you've mentioned farming and regenerative farming. Could you just explain, just as an example, what regenerative farming is as opposed to agro farming, the conventional, what is now conventional? What does it do that is helpful to the planet rather than destructive?
Yeah, great question. So regenerative farming, it is more of a no-till, less pesticides, so you can take, Gabe Brown taught me, he's a big regenerative farmer from North Dakota. So he had a commercial farm, and it took them maybe 3 years to get off of the chemicals and stuff like that. But what it does, one, it's going to help with erosion issues. It's going to make your soil better, and it absorbs more water. So we have floods, we've got our jet streams messed up and our ocean currents, messed up. So we're going to continue to have, drastic floods and fires and droughts and all this for decades. So one, you're going to have healthier biodiversity. You're going to have less erosion. You're going to have less flooding. You're going to have healthier food, healthier conditions for the farmers and the farm workers and stuff like that. So for me, we can transition big ag. We have to have a long-term plan, but we do need to get started on that. And so, there's a couple different variations of regenerative farming. They don't all agree with each other, just like a lot of experts don't on all subjects. But it's
Yeah.
more no-till, building organic matter, and more biodiversity and less chemicals.
Brilliant. Okay, so if we move on, I know that one of the other aspects is this kind of investment in physical projects like regenerative farming or rewilding or whatever version, landscape restoration. These would all be kind of conducive in the regenerative space as far as land goes. But I know another of your key interests in the last 3 to 5 years has been around blockchain, tokenization, Bitcoin, that sort of thing. What do you think? Because blockchain doesn't always have the greatest reputation, and tokenization, I mean, some of it's been exploited. There's been great disasters in that field already. What do you think that this whole electronic finance, new electronic finance systems offer that mainstream isn't at the moment? What's the potential you see there?
Yeah, so I have been in blockchain for well over 6 years now, and
Yeah.
I've been focused mainly on the regenerative finance side. And so there's literally way too many tokens out there. And so yes, there are scams, there are good projects that are good intended that will fail as well.
Yeah.
It's the best of Web3 is it's more open, it's more transparent. You can have lower fees, you can be more decentralized, so more people can vote on where you put that money, where you want to donate that money. It's more collaborative, more cooperative, or you can do some friendly competition as well. So there are several chains that are funding Gitcoin and Giveth, and to do quadratic funding. So if you have a project that gets 1,000 donors of $1, you might literally get, with the quadratic funding, if you're one of the top ones, which you would be at that number, you might get 10 to 40,000 extra dollars versus that $1,000 because of the quadratic funding. So bigger players and bigger corporations are donating that money to help seed the regenerative finance industry, which we do need to exponentially fund over the next 10 to 40 years.
So I'm a little bit backwards in my maths, but quadratic is to the power of 4.
Yeah, they call it quadratic, but it depends. So like if you've got a project, and I did the math on some that I donated to this last Gitcoin round, they do it every 3-4 months. And if they only had like 10 or 20 donations and not a lot of money, my money would multiply by maybe 5 to 10%, depending on how many followers. Now, if they were the bigger project, I actually donated $1 to something on Gitcoin or Giveth, and they actually said that it might get $85 of matching funds. So I'm not sure why they say quadratic, but yeah, my understanding of quadratic, it just means that you're going to get more, but it's based on the number of people that donate, not the amount of money you receive. They want to make sure that and they actually, in order for my money to be in the quadratic funding, I had to, give them my Google account, my Zoom, my Coinbase, they really, in my opinion, even did it too much. So they pretty much, they really wanted to make sure that there was no scams. So, and I understand that, but I did critique them, saying that's a little bit hard, even for me, because not all the, like Facebook didn't even work, and so they didn't have all the bugs out of the system stuff. But it's been a great boom and really helped out a lot of projects and people around the world.
So it's like it's almost like a kind of an advanced version of crowdfunding, because there's been all, politics have started to master crowdfunding to fund various political initiatives through small donations. So this is another extension of that. But then you've got investors saying if you've got deep enough roots in your community will multiply what you're trying to earn. That's how I hear what you're saying.
Right. Yep.
Like a funding multiplier.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's really fascinating. And one of the things you mentioned, democratic. So one of the things I've noticed is there's also blockchain, in a way, can provide something that huge institutions do not. Like banks are just not flexible. They're just not. Most of our funding instruments are too bureaucratic and not only interested in a certain level of profit. So could you, is there anything you're doing that kind of takes banks and finance institutions out of the picture and kind of goes peer to peer, or gets funding to areas where banks and loan institutions won't go?
Yeah, well, I do know of two organizations in America that will accept cryptos, and they will actually send it, if it's a verified NGO in most countries around the planet, it will actually send them even fiat money if they can't take crypto. So that is
Okay.
that is an option for the United States people. I think they might work with Europe as well. But again, for me, it's really got to be key that it's a vetted project, because we really don't have, yes, there'll be some scams and there'll be some good intending projects which won't work. Like I know John D. Liu, who created eco restoration camps. Now it's called eco restoration communities. I know that they have over 51 of them around the world. And I kind of blew his mind several years ago. And I said, well, how much does it cost for a camp? And he said about 250,000 euros. So I divided that by, $1 billion. And I think it was 2,000 plus camps. And now it's communities. And some of them have failed, in part maybe because of egos and stuff like that. That's okay. But the vast majority have done good. And I like it that they're more flexible. So it's not like a cookie cutter process where all camps have to be the same. So they have communities where it's a lot different. So I have a lot of like permaculture schools that I support, and regenerative farming schools and stuff like that. So for me, we've really got to scale that up, and so we can use the best of blockchain to have lower fees, lower costs, more decentralization, more open, more transparent. Yeah, and there's a lot of great things going out with the best of Web3.
Yeah, I think there's a possibility to restore faith in distributing money more democratically, which maybe aid organizations or huge NGOs aren't very effective in terms of distribution, and then also and getting it to the people that really need it. But also, I think blockchain needs trust restored to it, or needs to be seen that it can do good if it's in the right hands. So I think there's a double win there. So one of the things you mentioned is you yourself have philanthropic initiative, or take philanthropic initiative yourself. But I'm curious about how, because basically you could say philanthropy has come from the uber rich generally, and often that model is colonial, is capitalistic, it's exploitive, or it is often does good but doesn't make transformation. So what's the role of regenerative philanthropy? Because people are looking at how can we, like the Lankelly Chase Foundation completely it's going to end itself because it couldn't see any way out through this kind of colonial, capitalistic, undemocratic way of giving money away. So what role do you see that philanthropy has in the regenerative finance space?
Yeah, I think it's going to be big. And, again, I know the refi world very well. And, they do like a 24/7 space on X on Twitter. And, I've done 50 hours in a row straight on those. So, I know a lot of great projects and a lot of great people out there. Now, I personally have been working on a blockchain project, which is more philanthropic to help fund that. And I've worked a lot with NFT artists, so digital artists, and some of them are physical artists as well. And, it didn't happen as soon as I wanted, and it didn't happen in the way that I wanted, and it costs a lot more, and that's okay. But it's created a network of more heart-centered people who really care about, the future now and care about children and 7 generations of children that haven't even been born yet. And so we're looking at having 144 board of directors from around the world with different skill sets, from lawyers to accountants to policy people and, mental wellness and, regenerative finance people, security experts, stuff like that. And then rewarding good people with value. And my goal is that if they don't need the money, that they can receive the value, but give those tokens to an NGO or a not-for-profit in their area that they want. So it's not a taxable event for them. So I still got to talk with some accountants and lawyers to make sure that we can do that. But it's to reward good people and help them understand finances so that, can you imagine a world where we had, 1% of 8 billion is 80 million. Can you imagine if we had 80 million people who are really more heart-centered? They're the 1% who are heart-centered, really care, that they had more money, so that they had good food, they had rest, they had good health, and they were able to help their local communities. And that's what Dr. John Liu and I, or not Dr., but John D. Liu and I both agree on, is that when you have passionate local experts, and you give them whatever they need. So if they need a website, we help them with the website. If they need a grant, we help them write the grant. So that's basically the network that I've been looking to create. And I've got a lot of great board of directors and stuff. It just hasn't materialized as quickly. So now I put a lot of money into my little regenerative finance hub here in Serbia, which is also meant to be the regenerative finance hub for the vision that we're doing. And again, our network, you may come to our network and then we may point you to another community. So you might work with Gitcoin, you might work with Giveth, because it's not about us. We're going to be something that is unlike anything that's ever built right now, as far as I know, because it's not about us. It's about interoperability and connectivity and working with the best corporations and the best universities and the people that really get it and say, hey, we can do good and make a good return at the same time. Yes. And then if you got donation money, okay, well, here's Gitcoin, here's Giveth, and here's good NGOs that are vetted.
So listening into that, what I'm hearing is that you're configuring something or a center of like a node of an ecosystem. So you're not any cell or part of an ecosystem is there to serve other elements of the ecosystem. It's not necessarily there to only better itself. It takes what it needs to make sure it's viable. But on the other hand, each ecosystems of finance are there to mutually support one another rather than out-compete or out-extract or win, as it were.
Right, yeah. Like a lot of what I do is take good NGOs and inform them about Gitcoin or Giveth and the quadratic funding. So we don't even touch that money. And we tell them, if you've got a real NGO that's registered, then you can go ahead and look at other projects, look at what they wrote up and stuff like that. And then you've got, around 3 months to apply for the next round for Gitcoin. So the quadratic funding. So yeah, again, it's not about us touching all the money and controlling everything. It's about us being researchers, promoters. We'll do whatever funding we can do, but it's to do something. I mean, I've been working on this for literally since June of 1999, so it's like 24 years now. And it's just to help the world in the best way that I can, and obviously love, understanding, compassion, forgiveness, and transitioning together, more inclusive
Yeah.
That's what I've learned over these decades, to move forward versus a us versus them mentality.
Brilliant. So I think we've talked a lot in general in the big picture, and you've given some examples, but for somebody that maybe is new to regenerative finance and blockchain and the rest of it, can you give us some concrete examples of 2 or 3 things that have really succeeded, either through regenerative finance models or through blockchain or tokenization? Something with example on the ground of what shifted. I mean, you mentioned John D. Liu, but where the cosmo-local peer-to-peer way of doing things is really making a difference. It'd be great if you could illustrate this big picture with some examples like that.
Yeah, one is Joe Brewer, who I know from Facebook and LinkedIn, and I've done one-on-ones with him. He's also on Twitter. He's doing bioregional development in Colombia, and he also does talk in America and stuff like that. He's just raised like $150,000 to help that bioregional area. And so, again, it's finding those local passionate experts and have them, they understand the types of trees and the biodiversity and stuff, versus us, coming in as an outsider and say, hey, plant these trees, and it might be the wrong tree or the right species and stuff like that. And we don't know the water cycles, stuff like that. So yeah, that's definitely a win. I've got a brother, Christopher, from Zambia, who's got a PhD in agriculture. I introduced him to more green building, but he was teaching orphans how to do organic food for free. He's working with the prison systems. Tribal leaders have donated land to him. He actually is a pastor. He does some interfaith work there as well. That's another success story. Project Drawdown said one of the top 6 solutions for the planet was educating rural girls. So I have an adopted daughter in Uganda, and I got her a manual sewing machine. And then over the years, it built up to like 8 electric machines, and they had given free sanitation pads to girls who weren't going to school because they didn't have sanitation pads, and she provide them with help. She's touched over 2,000 lives just like in the last 4 or 5 years alone. So I'm big in that. Educating girls is another solution, and education in general. I have people that are into the STEAM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and arts. That's where the A comes in. You had STEM, now you have STEAM, where they've added the arts. And I work a lot with artists around the world. I've been on thousands of NFT art spaces on X.
I think that's interesting because, I mean, like, if you take Joe Brewer, who's he's working on a bioregion. But the other example is like there's almost a space or an opportunity with electronic communication, the web, and the ease of digital communication, that you can do micro-targeting and make comparatively a bigger difference because it just is a shorter time span for things to improve.
Yeah, we're able to communicate, through so many different ways now in video. And so if there are countries that have similar challenges or similar, biodiversity and stuff like that, then they can definitely work together a lot closer. But yeah, you can have experts, pretty much talking with almost anybody on the planet for free to take, good information in real time and help them in a lot of different ways. So we're going to know a lot where we're at in the next 3 to 5 years, whether we're headed in the right direction, because it's still going to take decades to do a lot of things. But it has to be more inclusive. It has to be inviting old money into the new ways and the old system into the new ways, because we just don't really have time to fight anymore.
I mean, I'm reminded of another initiative. I think I heard of it in the Netherlands, where there's a social entrepreneur was trying to improve the economics circumstances of subsistence farmers or in an African country. And rather than give them a huge grant, he gave them enough to buy a bike. And that bike made a huge difference to that person's livelihood, but also the local economy, because the right intervention at the right time in an economic system can create far more quicker kind of indicators of success or well-being and economic well-being than, you know, a huge grant that you know, it seeds corruption or whatever, or actually of the, like you were saying, the wrong grain or the wrong whatever at the wrong time. So there's something about, you know, your example of the young woman with the sewing machine and this example of one person. There's these it's possible to make these micro interventions that seed better prospect over time than regular kind of philanthropic initiatives might.
And then we also got her into making money for profit. So they could make bags, they could make dresses. They actually could sell some, you know, soda and pop, you know, in the store and like that. Because if you're just reliant on grants or donations, you know, depending on the economy up and down, you know, you may not get the steady stream of money that you need to do what you need to keep it going. So yeah, that's where, you know, thinking outside of the box is something that we're big on as well. And, you know, being the solution as best we can, taking care of ourselves as much as we can. That's why I support eco healing retreats and showcases and nature places so that people can, you know, reset themselves. I've heard that if you get out in nature and you do an electronic detox for 7 days, it actually rewires your brains. And
wow, okay.
Yeah.
So, well, you've mentioned nature and retreats, and I know that you're busy in Serbia, where probably you have no family or roots to begin with. So tell us a little bit about you know, your own project in Serbia and how all this other finance stuff does or doesn't have a bearing on what you're doing there. I'd love to hear about your on the ground initiative there and how this all fits with it.
So July 1st, I'll have been here for 8 years in Serbia. And probably within the first several months, I don't know if it was 4 to 6 months, I posted something on Facebook saying I was looking for a permaculture project to support or someone to help me to build one. And only one person responded, and it was in this village. So I've been coming to this village, which is an old monastery that goes back to the 1300s, is what I've heard. I was an angel investor, gifted her $15,000 over the years and brought hundreds of free women and man hours. And they've done 3 permaculture certification classes. They have swells, they have like hugelkultur and stuff like that. They're doing rainwater collection. They've got a lot of flowers, a lot of herbs. They've got a banana tree. They've had pigs, they've had chickens and stuff. You know, so this little village is pretty much self-sustaining. There are cows, pigs, chickens, horses, sheep, goats, kittens, cats, dogs, puppies, stuff like that. So I've actually bought 2 properties on the top end of there. So I have one smaller property that's a house, and I want to make that one a little bit fancier. But then this one that I'm on right now, I have two big pine trees, one big oak tree, one house, an A-frame, outdoor kitchen. I've got an old trailer that I bought, and I got ups and downs, got an old well. So I want this one to be a little bit more rustic, more natural, more earthy. So we'll be doing greenhouses, permaculture, gardening.
And how big is the land for this where you're now?
I don't know exactly, but it might be like close to half an acre. It's pretty big. There's probably 120 trees on it, a lot of fruit trees, different types of fruit trees. Yeah.
Cool. And what role do you feel that regenerative finance can play in assisting you to develop this? Is it a health spa? Is that what you'd call it? Or is it a permaculture? What is it you're aiming for?
Kind of a combination. It's kind of a combination. So, you know, I really wanted to support in eco-tourism or eco-building.
Eco-tourism, yeah.
Yeah, and then, you know, health and healing and relaxation is a big part of it. So I wanted to incorporate that, and then having it be a showcase property. So ecotourism, showcase property, and a healing retreat. And then we literally can walk to the farmland in the sunsets in like 2-3 minutes, depending on your capabilities from where we are. So there is good farmland around here. So doing regenerative farming and having it be like an example showcase hub hub for the world and
Yeah.
the hub for the Balkans has always been a part of my vision for this property.
And for people that are unfamiliar with the Balkans, obviously we're all aware of the troubled history they've had, and they're now in the process of repair and regeneration, to use that word. What sort of awareness or interest is there, given that, you know, maybe economically they're struggling for stability or trying to find prosperity? What sort of interest is there in, you know, planetary well-being, as you might say?
Well, so yeah, since this has been pretty much my life a lot for, you know, the last, you know, 2 to 3 decades. And so I have a lot of contacts. I've actually connected Serbians that didn't know each other that were into permaculture or green building. And one of my friends is doing a 2-week green building seminar. And, you know, so I do know a lot of green builders and permaculturists and people that want to work with the forests and work with lowering pollution. You know, lowering pollution is something that most people can agree on. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we're polluting our bodies too much, and then that causes healthcare challenges and quality of life decline and stuff like that. You know, so that's where, if you know your target audience, if you're talking with the far right and they don't think global warming, climate change is happening or real, or we just talk about pollution. So that's where communication comes.
Yeah.
You got to know who you're talking to, and then listen to them, and then ask them questions. Why do you think that? Why do you believe that? To get the conversation moving in a direction that can be more constructive to move forward together.
It looks like you've got some sophisticated political leanings in a good way there, Matthew. I think that's, yeah, go on. Yeah, it's going to say something else. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, on X, I'm on so many different spaces because being a researcher, for me, you've got to be open-minded. So
Yeah.
I'm on both sides of the equation. And so I actually have a lot of, you know, people who would consider themselves more liberal and progressive that love me. And then, you know, if I'm talking with people that are loving Trump and the far right and stuff, I talk about smaller government, which I do believe in, and stuff like that. Now, if you've got a bigger government that's running effectively and it's the people controlling it, and there's not too much corruption and graft and nepotism, yeah, and I'm fine with that as well. You know, so but you know, America's in decline, and most Americans know that. And you know, inflation is too many places around the world. So again, it does, you know, and believe me, I've made mistakes and I've upset people, and even people that I loved, I've upset. And people can be sensitive to certain words even, and it's just a crazy world that we live in sometimes.
So I think that's probably it from me. Is there any last words that you would like to share, or anything you'd like to add that you haven't said, or something you'd like to speak about before we close?
Well, the main thing is that I am an optimist, so I can't guarantee what's going to happen over the next 10, 20, 40 years, but I would say that small actions do matter. So everybody listen to this. You know, you can change your life, you can change, you know, that. And I learned that in 2000 because I wanted to change the world, and I learned to change the world. The best way to change the world is to change yourself.
Yeah.
You know? And then you put the oxygen mask on yourself first, and then you can help other people. So that's kind of what we're looking at doing, is creating all these amazing people from around the world so that we can connect and work with all the different people that are doing the more positive steps and being more inclusive. So that's pretty much how I'd like to end it. I am an optimist, and you know, we're just going to give it as much as we can. And the heart is stronger than the mind and the ego. So, you know, hearts can move mountains versus the mind and the ego.
Beautiful ending, Matthew. I'm going to stop the recording now, and then we'll just have a quick chat.